Dino at Speed Circuit here. We just picked up this 2017 Mazda Miata RF Club, and I'm here to talk about some things that we don't like about the car. I've had it about a week, and there's a few things that we need to talk about, and I think we'll be able to correct some of them, but other things are just inherent problems with the car, and we just kind of have to live with. Overall, it's a great car, and I'm sure that since I've only had it a week, there's going to be a lot of things that I'm not aware of. So if we missed anything, feel free to leave it in the comments below. So let's talk about infotainment gripes. The number one issue I have is that you can't use the touchscreen while driving. That to me seems a bit silly. I understand what they're trying to do, but it's sometimes difficult to use the knobs and buttons down here while you're moving just to do something simple or access something simple on the screen. Another major problem that I've had in the past week or so of owning the car is the infotainment system completely rebooting every 5 or 10 minutes. This is especially annoying when you're on a Bluetooth phone call and you're trying to use your wireless hands-free. I did a little homework on this, and it turns out that it's an issue that's caused by the nav card being inserted into this little slot right here. And if you remove it, it resolves the issue. However, you won't be able to use nav unless you have Android Auto in your head unit, which this year does not have, which we can upgrade later, and hopefully it'll solve all those issues. Another issue is the rear window visibility. It's not so great, but if you put the top down, it actually opens up some of the area because it removes a shroud, and it's just kind of easier to deal with. But when the top's up, it's significantly worse. Speaking of the top, another gripe I have on the RF model is that you have to actually hold the button in the whole time it's going up or down. Instead of just pressing the button once, you would think it would just do everything automatically. While we're on the subject, we should probably address the issue of the 6-mile-an-hour limit for the operation of the RF top. I understand why they would do this to some degree as a safety feature, because they don't want, wind blowing the top off or something like that. But there are aftermarket solutions. I'm pretty sure Flying Miata makes something that allows you to put it up and down up to 30 miles an hour. I feel like Mazda could have done a little better from the factory and maybe made it, 15, 20 miles an hour, just so you don't have to pretty much come to a complete stop to be able to use it. So the engineers probably have a reason, but I think they were a little cautious. Another common complaint is the fact that there's not a lot of headroom in the car. It's apparently a little worse with the RF. If the top was up right now, you'd see I have maybe about an inch of clearance because the top's a little thick. So I haven't tried wearing a helmet in here yet, but for a car that will almost certainly be used by a lot of racers, I think they should have built in a little more clearance. They could have just lowered the seat down a little bit to help with that. There are aftermarket solutions for that, but it's one more thing that you have to do and effort that you have to put forth. Miatas are probably the most raced cars on the planet, so I think 20 years from now this is going to be a big issue for a lot of people racing these cars. I'm a shade under 6 feet tall, and the fact that I'm kind of on the cusp of not being able to fit with a helmet on is definitely a potential issue. This issue is only in relation to the RF, but as you can see here, I have the window all the way up, and when I go to put the top back up, you'll see the window rolls down a little bit to make clearance, and that makes sense. But if you give it a minute and wait for the top to clamp back on, you'll notice it stays rolled down. So now I have to manually come over here and roll the windows up. Why doesn't it just do that? One of my biggest gripes about my 2001 Mazda Protege MP3, which I still own to this day, by the way, it's my first new car, and it's how many people initially knew me in the car scene, was the fact that there was always auto downs for the windows, but no auto up. And in this 2017 Club model, the same issue still exists. 16 years went by, and Mazda couldn't spend another 15 cents on wiring to make this happen. Come on, guys. Another complaint of mine that comes in here and there is the sun visors. They're sturdy enough, even though they're just kind of a cheap plastic, but the fact that they're fixed on 2 points here and they can't swing out of the way is kind of annoying, because when the sun is hitting you from that side, there's not much you could do about it if you don't have a pair of sunglasses handy. At least we have this little cool card slot up there, which you probably can't see on video, but I really wish Mazda would have addressed that a little better, especially considering the fact that a lot of people are going to be driving these on sunny days. As satisfying as it is to shift gears in this car, I love the way the transmission feels. Unfortunately, it really grinds my gears to report that a lot of people have problems with the reliability of the 6-speed manual transmission in these cars. There are 5 versions of the transmission. This is a version 2, which has the majority of the updates. However, a lot of people blow up transmissions, especially if they drive these cars quickly or on the track. Version 2 has most of the fixes, and they've only gotten better from there. However, the V1 transmissions were problematic for a lot of people. So it's a little aggravating to have to always worry about the longevity of the transmission, especially if you upgrade the power of the car, you know, putting a supercharger or turbo in it or any major gain, or if you're going to be tracking the car heavily and you happen to drive fast and hard. This is especially a sore point for me because, again, going back to my 2001 Mazda Protege MP3, that car made a lot of power. It was about 300 horsepower, and from the factory it was only made for 140, and it had the same exact transmission that the standard 130 horsepower Protege had. So once you got above 250 wheel torque or so, the transmissions would just grenade on a regular basis. It got to the point where I spent a lot of my early career building very expensive transmissions just to hold together, and it's still an issue to this day for a lot of people. It's a lot of money to invest in the transmission. A lot of people don't want to spend that money, and frankly, I really don't want to build these things. So I hope in years from now I don't regret having another Mazda transmission that I have to worry about. The gripe of mine is the fact that there's a lot of wheel hop from the factory. That's a function of the suspension for the most part, but allow me to demonstrate. You see? Not so great. This is a minor gripe, but it really needs to be pointed out. I have the Brembos on this. It's Brembos in the front, and just a standard brake caliper in the rear. But, I mean, they painted half of the brake caliper red to match the front, and the other half is bare metal. What are you doing, guys? You couldn't spend another 50 cents on paint and make this match? This looks like some kind of half-assed attempt at a DIY weekend warrior kind of guy. Oh, Mazda. As with most direct injection motors, the 2-liter in this car has an issue with carbon buildup on the back of the intake valves. Since we don't have injectors in the intake manifold, there's no way to spray the back of the valves off to keep them clean, and over time you will get carbon buildup on the back of the valves. There are ways to clean this by taking the intake manifold off, or there are solutions you can run in the intake manifold on occasion to hopefully burn some of that carbon off, but it is something to be addressed. Some other solutions include catch cans to minimize the amount of oil that is burning and sticking on the back of the valves. And some guys go to the extent of having a water meth injection installed, which often they'll tap from the reservoir there, in order to have a fluid always spraying in the intake in order to keep the back of the valves clean. That is going to be a long-term thing that we're going to have to deal with this car, and that's kind of the price you pay for having a direct injection motor. I don't mean to nitpick, but these exhaust tips look just kind of like, I don't know, raw stainless steel cut tips. They don't actually look like an exhaust tip per se, it's just the end of the pipe. I know they're probably trying to save cost and weight, but they could have done a little better than this. One unfortunate aspect of the North American models is they do not come with a floor jack, so you can't jack the car up on the side of the road in an emergency to remove the tire or anything like that. There is a provision for it. We removed the whole trunk liner just to get a better look, and it looks like it would attach right here. So you can go ahead and purchase one and bolt it up to there to use in an emergency, which is kind of nice. It'll add a little bit of weight, but that's okay. One problem that is relatively easy to fix is the fact that there's a lot of body roll. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot for a 1980s Lincoln, let alone a 2017 Mazda Miata. It just doesn't make sense why there's this much body roll. There's no excuse for it. Fortunately, sway bars are relatively cheap and easy to install, so that's going to be one of the first things done to this car. One of the biggest problems with the Miata has always been horsepower. Yeah, I know the ND2 partially solves this by giving you another 30-ish horsepower, and that's really nice, but it really needs to be about 300 horsepower, not 180. It's just not enough. But we'll solve that.